Hello. It's so good to connect with everyone tonight. I missed last week because it was my birthday week. I had a really good time at Disneyland with some very dear friends of my husband. So got some R&R to celebrate the day of my birth, and now we're back. I wanted to talk today about how somatic healing hit totally differently for me than talk therapy and healing my trauma. So let's talk about talk therapy for a minute. I've been in and out of therapists most of my life. I saw my first therapist when I was 14 years old. I was a very emotional kid. My parents were not very involved. F- for whatever reason, I'm not going to harp on my parents. They did the best that they could with what they had. Um, and sometimes that wasn't great, but here we are. It's my responsibility now to parent myself. But my dad started taking me to a therapist when I was about 14 years old. I was definitely suffering from depression. I was definitely isolating. And I just have to say, I loved my therapist as a teenager. Looking back, I think there are some things that could have been handled differently, but what I loved about my therapist was that she gave me a voice. She helped give me a voice where my parents really weren't validating my emotions. They weren't validating my experiences. They'd call me dramatic or make me feel small or make me feel less than for having big feelings about things that maybe seemed petty or unreasonable to them. Um, and so and then my dad was very, very strict. And, that comes from his upbringing and him wanting to protect me the only way he knew how. And that was really damaging for me as a young person trying to experience the world and just wanting to get in. I'm a very curious person. My poor dad, sometimes I am a very curious person and I need to do all of the things all of the time. I was very high energy. And he didn't have a lot of spoons for that, so I didn't get to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do as a kid, and he was just very strict. And so having that therapist and talking about, like, things I was struggling with, and then having an adult help me advocate to my father myself, and my therapist advocating to my father for me, was so helpful. Just having an adult that I could trust and felt safe with to talk about the stuff I was struggling with, talk about the stuff I was experiencing. I had to deal with, I was a teenager in the 90s when Kurt Cobain killed himself, and a lot of musicians were, dying of overdoses and things like that. So that was like in my sphere, not just in popular culture, but in my friend groups as well. So I experienced a lot of suicide, a lot of death, for accidental death through alcoholism or drug use. And, which I'm sure like many teenagers do, is very traumatic experience. And so having a therapist that I could safely talk about these things to was really, really helpful. I think that's what made my teen years survivable. And the other thing I'm grateful for that relationship with my therapist was, um, I'll tell you, the thing that I remember the most is to disagree without being disagreeable, which I kind of think is a little bit bullshit, but it really helped me be a little bit more relatable to my parents and advocate for myself to other people that would otherwise tone police me, or disregard me because of my emotionality. So like, I'm not a fan of the process, but it did help me. It did help me better advocate for myself. And I'm super grateful for that experience. I got to have group therapy with other teenagers as well. And my therapist and her peer helped navigate that. And it was a really positive experience. It was a really positive experience as a teenager. And I knew even as like a little girl, like I wanted to do something to be of service to other people. And, having grown up with all these traumatic things kind of happening around me, I knew that I wanted to give back the same way. Um, yeah, I grew up in a generation where parents were not very understanding. It worked for us, so it's going to work for you. It didn't, spoiler work alert, work for anybody. Um, and so like I fell in love with psychology. I started just pouring into books about psychology, reading articles online. Um, I decided that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a therapist for children, younger than teens, actually. I wanted to help other children through their healing process. And so I did all of these courses um, on psychology. I was really passionate about it. And I started my senior year in high school. I was looking at Berkeley. Like I really wanted to go to UC Berkeley to, to do my education as a psychotherapist. And I remember I had this reoccurring dream, no lie, for 6 months straight. 6 months straight, I had the same dream of me being in my office as a practicing therapist. And there was only one light. It was like this little dinky, like it's like the Pixar light on my desk. Just sort of like, but it had like a not great range of light. And all I could see across the entire edges of the room were stacks and stacks of paper. Just like from floor to ceiling, from the top of my desk up, all I could see was this sea of paper every day for 6 months. I loved psychology. I loved studying human beings, like understanding, nature versus nurture, and, how different medications can impact the brain, like how the brain develops. Like I loved that so much, like how our experiences like can impact us so dramatically. And I wanted to help people through this modality. And I realized through this dream that that was not how I was going to serve people best. What that told me was that I was going to get lost in the sea of paperwork that is the healthcare system, and that I would actually be spending more of my time in papers and in studies than I was like actually like getting to interact and to serve people. And that sort of like was jarring. I didn't know what I wanted to do for a long time after that. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher and a guide and a coach. Like that was always, but I didn't know how, what that was going to look like. And so I never lost my love of psychology. I was always constantly studying it. I did eventually go back and start a graduate degree in psychology, not with the goal of being a therapist, but because I wanted to use those tools and that knowledge to help temper uh, temper my information. I wanted to have that scientific background. It was very important to me. And I will continue to pursue psychology. I think that therapy is an amazing modality, and I think that it benefits a ton of people. Now, fast forward to adulthood, and I had a really hard time finding therapists. True story, I have had two therapists fall asleep on me in session. Two therapists have fallen asleep on me in session. And I would find someone, they would seem to click for a little while. And once I started to build up that trust, I would say, like, okay, like, I have things that I really want to work on. How do we go about that? Like, and they would say, oh, well, just, tell me you want to work on this thing, and we'll start to dive into that. And I would do that. I would say, okay, I want to work on this thing. I want to start exploring this. I want to start healing from this. I want some options, some tools, to like work through this. And what I found was the therapists, the way they would approach my trauma was usually very dismissively. They would never seem to go to that level. And I would say, hey, I want to talk about this, but the therapist would have their own agenda on what they wanted to cover in the session. And I found that, like, maybe I was like, we were never on the same page, never on the same page. And I always felt like unheard. I remember I was interviewing, I had, during my burnout journey, I was trying to find a therapist. I ended up taking myself to the ER, after months of not getting support from my healthcare provider. I took myself to the ER to see someone. I was like in distress. And I hadn't been taken seriously before. And I had this interview with a therapist, and we were talking about my traumas, like, very clinically. And like, she kept going, has anyone ever worked with you on this? And I would say, no, no, like, that's something like I've tried to approach, and no one would ever touch it. It was really, really interesting. And I've been through several therapists, trying to do some more deep work, and I just was not getting anywhere. And so somatic therapies, like considering like breath work and movement, like yoga and dance and sounding and chanting and tapping and all of this, I've been collecting these tools. Meditation. I have been collecting these tools. And I had an interview last week, and I was explaining that what was interesting about learning these somatic modalities, the way that I was being taught, was that it was all about the mind, all about telling the mind what to do. If the body gets fidgety, just ignore it, let it go. If you feel like you need to move, you need it to be very, very still and very, very in your mind. Cats are being silly. Very, very in your mind for any of this to work. And it wasn't like I wasn't connecting. I was completely dissociated from my body. And I had an opportunity to work with a mentor in a group for the first time in this sort of thing. I actually paid like good money to be in this really powerful group. And I healed more trauma in the 8 weeks of that course than I had in 20 years. Why? Why was that different? Why was that so much more powerful than therapy? So for me, having a mentor actually guide me through breath work, like active breath work with an intention to move and release specific things, expand, contract, connecting down into the body, like it's having someone guide me through that process where I was not required to provide verbal feedback, allowed me to really focus and sit in my experience, and not, how do I relate this to another person where they understand? How do I make this relatable? How do I filter this so what is coming out of my mouth doesn't make me seem overly crazy, like I need to be committed? How do I process this through somebody else? With breath work, with somatic experiencing, I don't have to explain or outwardly process or name what I'm experiencing. And I think for those of us with a lot of trauma and a lot of body dissociation, where we're not connected to anything below the neck. We don't have words. We have been taught to not truly feel our feelings. We have been taught to ignore our body's cues. We have been taught to suppress everything, to get over ourselves, to think about other people. We're making someone else uncomfortable. Therefore, we are wrong. Feelings are bad. Our bodies are bad. We should be ashamed. We should feel guilty. When you have that much repression, using your words is on a whole other level. Some people can do it, but a lot of us can't. We don't have access to that. That's why it's important to have someone to help guide, to connect you to your body so that you can just be here and in your experience and just allowing yourself to express and release what you need to express and release. And it hits completely different than a talk therapy session. Completely different. So I would love to know if any of this resonates with you. And just a little sneak peek, I am going to be offering a breathwork club coming up in a couple of months. If you're interested in more information in that, I have a wait list. Just drop a heart emoji in the comments and I will send you a link to sign up. I am really excited for this. I have almost the whole year of breathwork sessions planned out. There's going to be journal prompts and weekly check-ins. And what is really amazing about this modality is that you'll just be able to have your own experience and be able to process on your own, but also with a group that can help support, with a framework that can help offer guidance so that you're not just like all over the place, and someone that can check in with you and that is listening and paying attention. You're not going to be in a sea of people alone. You will be seen, you will be held, you'll be free to share if you feel called to share. You'll be free to not if you don't want to share. But I'm really excited to be offering this. I'm really excited to give people an opportunity to experience somatics, and that somatic healing, and help them start to achieve the things that they want to achieve in life. Help them work through these traumas that have been holding them back for so long. Maybe help them resolve these things that they didn't even know that they were struggling with. Let me tell you, that's my topic for next week is realizing through this my own the program that I experienced, was realizing that I had a particular kind of trauma that was making it difficult for me to have certain kinds of relationships and certain kinds, like specific kinds of experiences. And I wasn't prompted for that. It was just something that kind of came up for me while in a group breathwork session about, I can't even remember what, it doesn't matter what it was. What I gained from that was what was important, even if I didn't know it was there. Because that's the thing about trauma is we start to push it down, we push it down, especially if you're experiencing burnout. You've just been overriding your body's cues for so long that you can't even get to what you have so strongly covered up. And that's okay. That's okay. We do the best we can with what we have in the moment. No shame, no shade. I got you, boo. So again, if you're interested in my group breathwork offering that I'll be announcing in about a month or two, please drop a heart emoji down below and I will connect with you with that sign up link. It'll be going up in my bio pretty soon. But I'm kind of jumping the gun here. I'm really excited about it. I don't know if you can tell. So I love y'all. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me today. And I'm here for you. You have any questions, hit me up in the DMs. I'm super active here. I cannot wait to hear from you and connect with you. I hope you all have a lovely remainder of your Wednesday or Thursday or whenever you're watching this. Bye for now. Mm.